Jack was due to be drafted on the 8th of March, which had given the Dawsons less than a month to plan their escape from America. Their ship was due to leave from New York on the 28th of February, and it would take 2 weeks on a ship to get to Australia. The part where they visit the South Wales, a place Rose had been heard many great things about. The climate there was hot, beaches were white, the sea was blue, everything had seemed perfect. The move would be a pricey one. Selling their house was out of the option if Jack was to leave the country on notice. Jack hadn't told his boss that he was leaving. Neither did Rose. Maggie was a little scared of moving. She didn't want to leave her friends or her school, but Rose knew they had no option. The worst part for Rose was knowing that she would have to board a ship again. The thought of it frightened her. She had panic attacks just thinking about it. Megan, however, was just excited about a new adventure that she was about embarked upon. Jack and Rose had bought some new clothes for the trip and spent most of Ruth's money in doing so. It would be worth it, though. The only people Jack and Rose trusted fully was to tell their neighbors and good friends, Martin and Shelley Booth. Martin had been drafted too, and he suggested that the two families go to Australia together. This was something everyone agreed to. It made Jack and Rose feel relaxed about sailing, and of course Maggie was just having to have a playmate. On the 20th of February, the Dawsons and the Booths boarded the train to New York. As the train left the station, Rose had to shed a few tears as she didn't want to say goodbye to the place, which had become her home. But she accepted it well, and they left for New York years before that she would be adapt again very easily. The train journey took 3 days after a city and town of speeding through by the window. 3 days of listening to the chugging of the track, 3 days of being cramped and crowded, but they all knew it would be worth it. Rose began to feel sick again, with the nerves more and more, as the train pulled her further and further towards New York. Just the thought of seeing a ship that made her sick. The Booths knew nothing about the Titanic, and guess either Rose had been a first-time sailor or was extremely seasick. Megan and Andy, on the other hand, could barely contain their excitement. School in Los Angeles was forgotten to Maggie, and every hour she asked, "When will we be there?" The train that pulled up to the station in New York on the 23rd of February had the feeling of fresh air. It was amazing to feel so long a train. Rose breathed with the cold New York for the first time in 4 years and felt that she had missed it. She felt as though she had been away, but gazed at her daughter. The 5-year-old was holding onto her father's hand, whilst her big eyes gazed curiously at the people and the sights. She had been just a baby when they had moved to LA. Rose felt her stomach churn violently. It felt the urge to be sick. Jack saw her face whiten, and before anyone knew it, she fainted in Jack's arms. Rose awoke coughing and found herself in a strange room, with unfamiliar people around her. She sat up startled. "Jack?" she called. "I'm here," a voice said. Then he appeared. "Here, sweetie." He handed her some water and she took it gratefully. "How do you feel?" Jack asked, sitting beside her. "I don't know. Where am I?" Rose frowned. "You're in New York, remember? You're at a hotel. You fainted at the station, so we found the nearest hotel and brought you here." Rose nodded, taking this information. Her head throbbed violently. Suddenly she panicked. Where was her daughter? "Maggie?" Jack laughed. "Hey, shh. Calm down. Shelley and Martin took the kids sightseeing. They'll be back for dinner. You know how much of an adventurer our daughter is." Rose nodded and smiled before relaxing. "Here's your key, dears." An old woman entered the room, wearing an apron. Her hair was gray, but it was in a bun neatly. She smiled at Rose and held out her hand. "I'm Peggy, dear. I run this hotel. How are you feeling, Miss Bulktaker?" Rose blinked a few times. She was hearing, right? Miss Bulktaker? "My name's not." "She's fine, Peggy, thank you." Rose and Jack took the key and muttered something to Rose as she couldn't understand it. "I am fine, thank you. Call me Rose." Peggy nodded. "You're in room 24, Miss Bulktaker. Mr. Bulktaker, on the 3rd floor." Jack nodded and thanked her for her kindness. The room was nice and spectacular. It just contained a couple double bed and a wardrobe in the bedroom, and found a fireplace in the sitting area. The bathroom was down the hall, and dinner was served downstairs at 7. Jack, why did she call us Miss Booktaker? I told your old last name. I couldn't say Dawson or Dewitt Booktaker, could I? Suppose not, Rose not agreed. She stretched on the bed as Jack hung a few shirts on the wardrobe. I haven't just been called that in years. It feels like it's almost never Miss Dewitt Booktaker. It feels like I've always been called Miss Dawson. Maybe you have, Jack smiled, and Rose frowned. Maybe you were destined to marry me. Maybe fate brought us together. Maybe we were meant to be. Rose laughed. A little too much for Jack's liking? You old romantic Jack. I'm serious, Rose. Maybe everything happens for a reason, you know. We have had out in a heartache, Rose. The Titanic, your mother, the miscarriage, Philip, been drafted. Maybe it's all for a reason. What's the reason? I don't know, Rose, but whatever life throw at us, I'll be there, right beside you, to comfort you and help you through this. I'll be here forever. If you can handle me as an old cottager. Rose laughed. What about me, Jack? When I'm old, will you still love me in a podgy stomach from having so many babies? My breasts and bottom pointing south? Jack grinned and then broke into a laugh. You, my dear, will be a goblin, but I'll still love you. Yeah, right. No, I'm serious, Rose. Nothing could stop me from loving you. As for babies, I love you more each day. I want more babies. I want to raise them with you. Watch them grow. Give them a good life, Rose. Rose's smile faded and she gently kissed Jack. She was taken aback of herself because she rarely kissed him at first. She felt like if she wanted him now more than ever. She was desperate to be a mother again, just as she wanted to be a father. Dinner was served at 7 that evening, and the Dawsons and the Booths had dined together, found themselves looking forward to the journey ahead. After 4 days at the hotel, the Dawsons and the Booths were on the move again. The cab ride to the docks was quiet. Rose's stomach churned heavily, which said she did not say anything. She had already thrown up 3 times the past 2 days. The nerves were getting the better of her. The ship was due to set out for Australia at 3 p.m. Memories flooded both to Jack and Rose as they stepped out of the cab. Memories of the last time they boarded the ship. Almost 6 years before, the Titanic had loomed tall and stand proud at Southampton, where the ship was like a fraction of size of the Titanic. She was named the Elizabeth and was certainly pretty. The memories of the day, Carpeta docked and swirled around Jack's head. The press, the flashes, the cries, the gloomy sky. Rose had bundled the blankets, grabbing his hand tightly, not wanting to let her go. Megan tugged on her father's jacket and brought him back to reality. Daddy, when do we go on it? She asked excitedly, obvious to see everything around her. Soon, darling, soon. By 2:45 p.m., the final whistle blew and the passengers rushed aboard the ship. All right, let's go, Martin smiled. He grabbed his son's in his hand in his suitcase and led his wife up to the gangplank. Rose nodded. Just placing one foot on the gangplank was enough to make her hysterical, but she had to do it, for herself and her family. Slowly, she placed one foot in front of the other and walked to the gangway, clutching Jack's hand more than ever. She could feel her squeezing his hand. He was too nervous, but appeared to be collected to Rose to calm her. Maggie skipped happily and aborted the ship with no fuss. The rooms were pleasant and comfortable. It was second class, so it was neat and tidy. Definitely far cry from Rose's suit on Titanic. But over the past few years, Rose had grown to like it more. Jack removed his hat and threw it on the counter. There was room for Maggie and a double room for Jack and Rose. The sitting was small with the suit, and the chair was next to a bookcase. There was a chessboard and even a desk. The bathroom was small and contained a bath with hot water, and there was a small wardrobe area. There was a cafe where snacks could be brought and dinner could be served on the main restaurant at 8. Once on board, Jack relaxed a lot, whereas Rose seemed to grow more nervous. At once, Maggie had gone to the booths to wave goodbye to the people on board, whereas Rose had preferred to stay in her room, not wanting to know that they were to set sail. "Come on, Rose," Jack pleaded. "You have to come to dinner. You haven't eaten all day." Rose shook her head and buried her head back in the book and began reading that afternoon. "Rose, come on, darling." "No, Jack," Rose spoke firmly. "Mommy, come to dinner," Megan said innocently. Dressed like a little pink dress with a bow, Rose had to smile. She was beautiful. Jack looked smart in the suit, and the booths had already headed upstairs for dinner. "Come and get dressed up for dinner, Mommy," Megan smiled. Rose stood and nodded. "All right, but this is for the both of you, young lady." Megan giggled and fixed her ringlets. Jack followed Rose to their room, where she scanned the wardrobe. "What on earth can I wear, Jack? I have no suitable clothes. Besides, I don't want to look like a prized wife." "You won't, darling. I want you to be there to eat. Besides, you used to love putting on a pretty dress, some makeup, and going dancing. What happened?" "I became a mother, that's what happened, Jack." No, we've been dancing since Megan was born. Hey, what about this dress?" Jack pointed at the red sparkly beaded dress. Rose gingerly took it and held it up against her. "This is what Samantha bought me back in New York for my 18th birthday." "I know, it seems that long ago. It seems like the most finest dress I've owned." "Well, there you go. Wear that. You look very stunning in it." Jack raised his eyebrows. He looked so handsome in his suit. His hair waxed back and he had no facial hair. Maybe he might have been 26, but she still wore that he still looked like a 20-year-old boy who escorted her to dinner on Titanic that night. "It may not fit, but since I put a bit of weight on it since I was 18, Jack." Rose crossed her once crossed in the red sequin dress. Rose smiled. She had to admit that she looked pretty good. She applied some lipstick to match her dress and applied some color to her cheeks. She wore a black cord shoes and sprayed perfume. Her hair was pinned up and a single curl fell on her face. "Shit, Rose," Jack laughed. "You look sensational." Rose smiled. "So I still scrub well?" "Well, Mommy, you look like a princess." Maggie gazed up in awe at her mother, having never seen her so dressed up. Her eyes glittered with excitement, and for the first time in years, Rose actually felt glamorous young woman. "And so do you, darling." Megan then looked at her mother's, and they headed out for dinner. "Dear Diary, yesterday I did something I never thought I would do again. I aboard a ship for Jack and Maggie, and I'm heading to Australia to escape this damn war. Jack was drafted as Martin was, so we did the only thing we could do and fled the country. Aborting the ship again was hard. I still feel that my legs will just cave beneath me. Megan was natural with ships. She loved it. Jack is already teaching her how to fly by spreading out her arms and telling her to close her eyes. She squeals happily, and then Andy will want to go. I swear, it hasn't been 6 years since Jack took me the bow of the Titanic and taught me how to fly. But it is. I retreated to my stateroom alone and cried for the first time in a long time. I mourned from the memories, my mother, all the souls that are lost on April 14th, 1912, my baby, and just everything in general. The war is already taking millions of lives. The world seems to be crumbling apart before my eyes. Everyone, including God, is powerless. Maggie thinks the idea of war is a good thing. She likes to play gunfights with her friends and rolls around in the grass, staining her dresses. I swear, she's more like her father every day. I look into her eyes and I see the young man I met 6 years ago, and now we have a child together. She adores her father, now more than ever. She is a natural with her. I mean, I see them together, my heart melts. For a long another baby, Jack and I have been trying for almost a year now, but to no avail. I would love to have another little baby. It seems so long ago since I've held one, and I'm scared I've forgotten now. Jack wants a little boy now, and that would most certainly be a handful. We all went for dinner last night to the restaurant, and even though I was hesitant, I have to admit I rather enjoyed it. Megan was a little lady, I know she is, has been polite and is behaving. Andy, however, was not. He tugged at his collar right and all night and complained about the food being too fancy. He made us laugh so. Once back in the staterooms, Jack and I once again tried for a baby. I hope this time it works. It would be perfect timing. Starting a new life over with a new baby. The damn ship is making me feel so queasy. I simply cannot wait to dock. I'm stupid enough to search the icebergs in the Pacific Ocean. The weather is lovely. Warm sunny day all day. My nose is slightly red and burnt, but I don't care. It amuses Jack, and he could get a tan. I, however, just burn. Maggie was just my skin tone. I would have to be careful with her for her being in the sun too long. She does wear a hat, which she loves, and unlike me. I guess there's some things that she didn't inherit from me. Rose Dawson. Once again, Rose put down her pen and ran towards the bathroom, heaving violently over the toilet. This damn ship, she cursed to herself. Another week and a few days left, and yet she could not wait to dock. The ship had made her feel more ill than ever. Rose had never once felt to be seasick. She actually never used to mind boarding ship, but this time Rose was heaving almost every morning and was unsure why. Probably the nerves that she had guessed. Rose started for the living room when Jack called her. "Coming," she shouted. Rose appeared at the doorway of their bedroom and frowned. "Are you alright, darling?" His voice was full of concern. "Maybe you should see a doctor. You've been like this for a few days now." "Even before we aborted," Jack pointed out. He was obviously worried. "It's nothing, Jack, I'm sure. It's obviously I'm just nervous. Maybe something I ate back in New York. I am not used to what it was sort of food anymore." Rose then Jack rolled his eyes. He knew that he would have to try more to persuade her to see a doctor. She was the most stubborn person that he knew. "Rose, please, see a doctor. You don't know what it could be. Remember last time when you were ill like this when we arrived to New York? You were pregnant and it could be good news." Jack grinned, but Rose pushed him past it to settle in a chair with a book. "No, Jack, it's not. I would know if I was with child. My monthly flow is still very much regular." Jack then blushed a little, knowing that she was timid to say such things, but he didn't care. He would get her to see a doctor however he could. "Rose, please. I'll go with you. Hold your hand, darling. I know you hate seeing doctors, but please." Jack was on his knees in front of her, and he took her hand and kissed it gently. "Fine, I will see a doctor as soon as we dock," Rose stated. "No, Rose. Today I will book for you." Rose sighed and nodded. "Fine." "See, Rose, I am just as stubborn as you," Jack grinned, before exiting the door. Rose smiled before sighing heavily. She had nothing to do. Megan was out with the Booths, and Jack had been gone off to make an appointment. She had read a lot of her book. Rose started for her bedroom and opened her wardrobe. She found a few dresses and coats and sighing before closing it. Searching, she found a suitcase. Jack had packed most of their things, and she knew how untidy and messy her suitcase would be inside. He had stuffed things carelessly, and Rose had to smile at the dresses in the suitcase. They were all wrinkled, but of course, Rose had searched for the dresses, almost passed out when she found at the bottom her Titanic dress. Her tears had pricked in her eyes as her breath was caught in her throat, so much that she had to sit down. It was just like a screwed up piece of blue and gray rags. The dress had once been hung in Paris shop window with an expensive price tag, to now here it is, stuffed in the bottom of the suitcase, looking the worse for to wear. Carefully, Rose untangled the dress and then looked in front of the mirror, holding the dress against her. Memories came flooding back to her. She immediately dropped it to the floor, and she covered her face with her hands and ran over to her face and wiped away her tears. Hesitantly, she picked up the dress back up and held it against her again. She wondered if, for some unknown reason, how would it look on her after all these years. if it will still fit, and how different she would feel wearing it. She shrugged and changed into the dress to unpinned her hair. Rose didn't want to see her reflection yet. The fitting was a little tight, especially around her stomach, but she had been just 17 when she wore it, and she had the perfect figure back then. Rose turned and, almost in slow motion, to face the mirror, was shocked at what she saw. She looked the same as she did back in 1912. Tears fell from Rose's eyes as she picked at the material of her dress. So many things had happened while she was wearing the dress. It had been one of her favorite dresses when she was younger, and one of the only dresses she had the pleasure to been able to purchase herself. Rose knew that she could never throw it away. Her daughter had been conceived in that dress, and it had become a woman while wearing it. Maybe she could give it to Megan when she was old enough to read it, or maybe it would remain at the bottom of the suitcase, screwed up for another 6 years. Who knows? Just then, the door went and Jack sounded. Rose didn't move. She was too fixated on their dress. Shit! The words broke Rose's concentration. Jack gasped as he entered the room. He thought that he was seeing things at first, but he wasn't. Rose was wearing the dress that she had worn the night the Titanic sank. What are you doing? I found it and just wanted to see what it would feel like. Rose's voice sounded distant. Rose turned to face Jack. She had clearly been crying. How does it look? She asked. Jack frowned. What the hell was she doing? This didn't seem like Rose. He looked up at her and down. She looked stunning. She always had been in that dress. She looked like the 17-year-old young girl who had been since the day they met. It was almost like the last 6 years had never happened and went back to this again. On the ship with Rose wearing the oh-so-familiar dress. I never want to go back to this, Jack. I never want to go through this again. I don't want to end up like that 17-year-old girl again, lonely and scared. Rose sighed heavily. She didn't know where all this would come to. Maybe it was just the fact that she was on the ship again. Her hormones seemed to soar lately, as she was unsure of why. Jack shook his head. You won't, darling. I'm here always. I won't let you be unhappy again. Ever. Rose nodded. The material on her dress dug into her arms and began to sting. The dress was obviously too tight. You're at the doctor's in an hour, darling. Rose nodded nervously. Jack took her hand and kissed it tenderly. I'll be there. I promise.